you should know how you're going to finish before you start. Welcome to the shop and back to my channel. We are going to start the Armoire project from Mara. The previous video I did on this was just kind of an overview introduction. So we're going to start it. This will be episode 1. I don't know how many episodes it's going to be. And in this episode, I'm going to show some drawings and things changes I've made to the design. But the crux of this episode is making a jig for cutting the dados in the uprights of the armoire for the shelf spaces where dividers and everything. When I first started designing this thing, it was getting really complex, and I stopped myself, deleted that drawing, and went on and said, and this can be a lot simpler, which it is, a lot simpler than it was. Now at the opening I said, you have to know how you're going to finish before you start. That's a quote from Charles Neal, a woodworker I used to know. He's since passed. And what it basically means is, know how you're going to finish the project before you start the project, or at least have a good solid idea where you're going with the finish. Because you could get to that point, stare at it, say, okay, now what do I do? How do I want to, no. Have an idea of how you're going to finish it. So, this armoire is going to be in cherry. The finish is going to be 1 or 2 coats of de-waxed amber shellac to give it a bit of color, atop which I will put hand rub-on polyurethane in semi-gloss. I like that stuff. But the amber shellac is what I'm going to give the piece color with. Now, I can tune that, and the reason I want to tune it is because the parts are going to come out of separate trees, because I can't go down to my local supplier, Maryland Select Hardwoods, and buy a tree, a flitch of a tree. I can buy boards, and they're all going to be slightly different, so I've got to tune the finish when I get to that point. So let's look at some drawings that I've done, and I'll give some explanations of why I did the things I did and the changes that I made. Then we'll get on to building the jig. Here's what I mean by some of the changes. You notice the verticals are like 1.5 or so, and the horizontals are 3/4 inch. So everything's going to be 3/4 inch facing the viewer who's looking at it. So it'll be more symmetrical that way. Also on the drawers, there's this 3/4 inch border that you can see surrounding the drawers, and that's going to be removed. There's going to be a bead detail around the drawer fronts. And here's my reference drawing. You'll note everything's going to be 3/4 facing you. The blocky bits at the bottom are just a placeholder. I'm not sure what kind of legs we're going to put on the thing yet, but this gives you an idea of my construction methodology here. Here's the side. The back of it has a dado for the back of it, and up front, at the front of the dados, they stop 3/4 of an inch from the edge, so it'll be a 3/4 inch piece of cherry that'll cover the front of all of the plywood dividers, which are plywood frame dividers. Here's how I'm going to cut the dados. I'm going to be hot gluing these back to back and putting the jig across them, and then cutting the dados, and the jig has a stop in it, so that I get symmetry on both sides of the cabinet, so everything's going to be straight, hopefully. And here's about what basically what the finished jig is going to be. It's 1/2 inch plywood. It's held together by 2 little blocks at either end, and at the end of the slot, which is going to be set by the plywood I'm making the frames out of, there'll be a stop block in there, and that will stop the router from going to the edge of either side of the cabinet. This will be adjusted for other dados I have to make as well. Have my handy drawing here that I showed you on the screen. I have a piece of 1/2 inch fairly straight board plywood. It's from the Home Depot, I think. Sandy board. The hell is that? And I'm going to hold the jig onto the sides and every other place I'm going to be cutting a dado, because there's going to be a lot of dados. There's the top cabinet, the bottom cabinet. There'll be a bunch of dados. I'm going to hold them in place with toggle clamps on the bottom. They just snap right into place and hold it nice and tight. Put those aside. Now, what do I want? I want precision. I want exactly 3 inches. So the first thing I have to do is define an edge. Now, I've got this set to where I can take off, come back. Take off about 1/8 of an inch off of one side. That'll give me a starter edge. Hopefully it will be straight. I mean, it's relatively straight. These are relatively straight in this dimension. It's this dimension where plywood can go a little fluey. So let's do some cutting. So, cut out the pieces. Like I said, I left a little extra so I can, if I need to get it tighter. I'm just checking. Okay. Perfect. Now I can do the actual, the 3-inch cut. We'll just clean up the surface. Let me clean it up to exactly 3 inches. I don't need to be exactly 3 inches, but that's what I drew. So let's do that now. The other piece I cut is the 2-inch piece that's going to make the ends of the jig. And there we have it. The top and the bottom of the jig, and the piece that's going to become the ends. And now my drawing, of course, blew off the table. I need to get that. Now, here we go. So the distance between the ends, they're going to cross it over like so, is 42 inches. I mean, that is when I put in the drawing, when I put the sides back to back like this, laying flat, that's 42 inches. So that's what I want to get these set at. So first thing to do is to cut this to length, and the length on this is 46 for both of these. Nope, put that in. And I'll do a little sneaking on this as well. Oops, need a pencil. Luckily I have lots of pencils. So there's 46 right there. Getting my tools that I should have had all along. So I'll set those bottom pieces that underneath that hold this together, that are going to hold up against the sides. I'll set that to the correct 42 inches. Because I'm screwing and not gluing this together, that will be adjustable at the other end when I'm ready to start using it. So I got to cut these off, chop the ends of these off. You get to see my new chop saw location in effect. Little trick here, just for giggles, for no other reason. I mounted the laser switch out here. You know, no big deal. Just that was kind of a fun thing to do. Now I want to keep this flush on the other end. And the laser is set on this side of the blade, on the left side of the blade. Fine adjustment. So that should give me, and I'm going to sneak up on it because I'm that guy. A little bit more. Bingo, 46, right on the nose. So those are ready for a partial assembly, I think. Now I got to cross-cut the end pieces, and those are 6 3/4 inch. So mark this at 6 3/4, like so. Move the laser over to the other side of the blade. So now I'm dialing the laser over to the left side of the blade. This is one of the inconvenient things about this chop saw. I like to have a dual laser chop saw if I could. So I'm going to cut that out. This is doesn't have to be perfect in this case, but yep, perfect. Now I'll bring this over, hold that flush here, and get the laser just falling off of the edge of this piece here. Perfect. Now, as I stated, this is a single laser saw, and you have to move the laser back and forth. For a future video, I bought this laser. I have to get I know I've got it somewhere in my records. This is a laser that is the width of the saw blade, and when you mount it correctly in here, it puts a line across your workpiece that is the width of the saw blade. So you know where to put the line. But I've been thinking about it. This is down the road a ways. I have to make a mount for this, but later for that. So here's my 2 cross pieces for either end of the jig. Now let's kind of assemble this together. And this is not going to be the final assembly. The final assembly is when I get the frames built from the dimensional lumber, and then I can adjust the dimension between these 2 pieces of wood for cutting the dados with that lumber. And this is the bit I'm going to use. It's a wonderful white side patterning bit with a top or bottom, that's top, a guide bearing. So I want to put the cross pieces in first. I've got some holes pre-drilled. I can use the pre-drilled holes to line up these screws into the wood. But to be sure I've got some squareness going on here, let's put this square up here like that. Put a screw in. Okay. And we do the other side. Now, I've already marked it at the 42 inches that the width of the 2 sides together is going to be. And again, I pre-drilled some holes. Get that. There we go. It's lined up with the hole. But let's also make sure we have a squareness going on. Bingo, square. So, you see where we're going? All right, easily to figure out. So the next thing to do is I've got this piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and this is a fairly accurate piece. It's close. When I measure it, it's like 1 line width less than 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to use that as a temporary spacer to align this, and I'm only going to put 1 hole, one screw in at either end, and that's because it's temporary. Number 6 screws for here, by the way. And I want to get a little bit of tension on this. But once I get this put together, you'll know exactly how this is going to work and what's going on. Just a little bit. Okay. And this one, yes. All right. Take the clamps off. I have a snug fit here, which is what I want in the finished product. I don't want loose dados. I want not tight snug dados, but a little bit of friction fit in the dados. And that can be adjusted because this can be adjusted. And here we have the jig in its semi-finished form. And you can see what's going to happen here is once this is clamped down to the workpiece, I'll run the router bit along the plywood with the bearing and cut the dado, which is going to be, all the dados are going to be 1/4 of an inch, not 3/8. I don't need I don't need 3/8 of an inch for this structure. I just need a 1/4 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch. And measuring across this thing, yeah, it hasn't moved at all. That's good. Now, how I'm going to hold it on is with the toggle clamps. I have a toggle clamp here. Let's install the toggle clamp. Change to the number 2-bit driver. 2-bit driver, how about that? And number 8. I'm using number 8 screws for this. Mainly because the heads will stop. They won't go through the hole at the bottom. And this is how we clamp to the workpiece. And this is infinitely adjustable, so I get it just as tight or as loose as I want. And all you need is 2 screws. You don't need 4 screws for this because you're not going to put that much pressure on it. So that's it. That's the jig. Why did I do the jig first? Simplest thing to do? I don't know. The next time around here, we're going to start building the frames. And I'll put more pictures on the screen to show you my frame design. It's basically 3-inch wide, 1x3 stock, which will 1x4 stock, which I'll cut down to 1x3, something like that. They'll be held together with pocket screws, but the long pieces are going to go right to the side, and then the interims, the infill pieces will go between. That way you've got, strength this way. The verticals now, the inside verticals that you may have seen, you saw in that original drawing, that hold the dividers for the shelf, the drawers on either side, and where the little closet thing is, they're going to be 3/4 inch plywood. I don't want those open with just frames. That would be a little more complex than I need, but this way I only have to use 1 4x4 piece of plywood as opposed to 2 4x8 sheets of plywood. The 4x8 sheets of plywood are $83 a piece. 1 4x4 to do those dividers, plus a little scrap here, I'm happy. So, the jig is done. The jig is up. Whatever. The next video, we're going to start on the frames. I'll probably hopefully get the frames done through the next video. So, until next time, make great things out of wood.